This episode of Fermented Adventure the Podcast features Michelle Cudia of Cudia Cocktail Consulting. We had a wide-ranging, fascinating conversation about cocktails, the cocktail industry, and how Michelle helps bars and restaurants set up their cocktail program. Not to mention the great, memorable events that Michelle helps to create. Please do reach out to Michelle at Cudia Cocktail Consulting and let them know what you thought about the podcast. Cheers! Hello, ladies and gentlemen, craft spirit enthusiasts, and those interested in the intoxicating world of craft distilleries, cideries, meaderies, wineries, and the occasional foray into breweries. It's Rich Shane, and welcome to Fermented Adventure, the podcast, where we bring you the fascinating people that are making the mash, fermenting, distilling, bottling, pouring, and delivering to you some of the finest libations in the world. Before we get started, here are a few housekeeping items. Thank you for bringing the podcast into wherever you are and whatever you're doing. We truly are grateful that you have chosen to listen and make us part of your day. It would mean the world to us if you left a 5-star review. This helps us climb in the rankings, and it makes it easier for others to find us. Don't hesitate to leave us your comments as well. If the podcast didn't meet your expectations, tell us why. We're always striving to improve. You can find us at fermentedadventure.com. We are on Instagram and Facebook as Fermented Adventure. Email us at fermentedadventure@gmail.com. All right, FA Nation, let's meet our guest. She's Michelle Cudia. I'm Rich Shane. This is Fermented Adventure, the podcast. Michelle, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right, here's where I go. We've already talked a little bit before the podcast. The enthusiasm is building from when Josh Douglas of Widow's Peak mentioned you in our interview and really gave a lot of praise to you helping them at Widow's Peak set up their bar program. So Michelle Cudia of Cudia Cocktail Consulting, welcome to the podcast. And how did all that get started for you?
I was doing work for Tria. I don't know if you know about the Tria wine bar group.
Yes.
Yeah. So I was working at Tria Taproom at the time as a bar manager. And they wanted to extend their draft cocktail program. I guess I can say it now. Maybe they didn't know it then. I had no experience with draft cocktails, but hey, they were like, oh man, you're the one that talks about cocktails all the time in a wine bar with beer. Would you have any interest in potentially being a part of this? And then I wrote like this 10-page document about all the things I wanted to do with their cocktail program. And then they were like, you're hired. So I signed like a completely separate contract from my front of house, and it was like a consultant contract. And I was like, oh, that's something that's interesting. And it kind of like blossomed from there, the idea that I didn't just have to do cocktails for one place, and that like I could spread my like cocktail nerdiness to multiple people and events. So then in 2019, I started an LLC called Cudia Cocktail Consulting and the website, and started meeting clients, doing like my first client that wasn't Tria was a bachelor party. It was these two chill dudes. And the guy was like obsessed with Franklin Mortgage, and he talked about like this mezcal cocktail that he really loved, and that, you know, him and his brother have like always gone to Franklin, and they wanted to recreate the experience for the brother's bachelor party. So I literally went to this apartment building, like this apartment with like this beautiful setup Airbnb. I like rolled in with like this cooler filled with like all the different ice, and then like all these fresh juices, and, you know, all the booze that they could, you know, that like they brought the booze, but I brought some like special bottles for them because I figured, you know, wanted to make it a little special. And I ended up teaching the groom like how to chisel out ice and like make his mezcal cocktail. And they were like so thrilled. And that's kind of where that excitement started for me. And I just kind of kept going from there. Yeah, I guess that's, you know, kind of how all that started. And I've done different things since then. A few different restaurants, bars, weddings. Oh man, there was this 250 person wedding, but they didn't stop drinking for 6 hours. It was just me and my friend. And we did like custom cocktails, and we were just rocking out. But yeah, so that's that's kind of what we've been doing.
See, this is when Josh, you know, sung your praises. I knew I'm like, all right, we need to speak with Michelle. the grand marshal of, this parade of cocktails that he was talking about and what they've created together with you and their spirits. And you mentioned a couple of things, and so many, there are places I want to go today and talk about. You said nerdiness.
Yeah.
And I would be remiss if we didn't talk about your ice nerdiness or your ice fetish or what is this for you? Talk about this and what is it all about?
I think that temperature, dilution, and all of that is just as much of an ingredient in a cocktail as a liquor that you pour in. I think a cocktail can easily be ruined by not enough dilution or too much. You ever had a watered down mojito, or, your Manhattan just doesn't taste right and you're trying to figure out why because you put all the other ingredients right? Look at your ice. Look how you stirred it. Did you shake your Manhattan? Please don't. That kind of stuff is super important. I learned a lot of that when I worked at Randstad Room. I'm not sure how familiar you are with Randstad.
I am, but our listeners may not be since it's international.
Yes. So Randstad Room is currently a speakeasy bar. This is technically a Steven Star restaurant connected to the back of a Mexican restaurant called El Rey. Funny enough, they used to share a kitchen. I cannot quote for now if they do post-COVID, but I definitely do remember serving, as a bartender there, quesadillas with my Manhattans. But we learned there, that was my biggest, have you ever met people that you feel like they kind of understand you? For me,
Dawn's that for me. So,
so Randstad, we were all just so excited. And it's one of those things where it was a job of a labor of love. We didn't necessarily make a lot of money then. But it was we juiced all of our juices before service. So it was fresh every day. We hand chiseled out ice. So that is when I'm talking about chiseling out ice, we would literally freeze big blocks and then break them down ourselves. So I have ice picks and my little trident, which I use to hand carve out the rocks, which I'm referring to, that big piece of ice that ends up in old fashions and down drinks. So yes. Rocks, I break them down myself. And we did that for Randstad and Philadelphia Distilling as well when I worked there. So, there's just this presentation and the way that a big rock doesn't melt as quickly so you can really enjoy your drink for a long time. It doesn't need to be feeling like something that you just need to drink immediately because otherwise it's not going to be perfect. It's going to be perfect for as long as you want it to be. And so I'm, really grabbed into that appreciation for every part of every ingredient and how they contribute into a cocktail and making that perfect experience. So for me, ice is one of those things where even at home, Tria let me take, I guess take is a wrong word. I did ask if I could have one of their chest freezers they weren't using. And now at home, I just have my own little dedicated ice program where I just do my own big blocks. And then sometimes when, you have a hard day, you just pull it out and then you just start smashing it into all the pieces that you need. It's very cathartic.
I'll tell you what, there are all these kind of fitness, anxiety, stress relieving programs out there. I think you might be on to just a new one where you're just chopping ice and then you could take the byproduct and start selling that to bars and restaurants through their cocktail program and just expand on that. I think that'd be exciting. I would sign up.
Also too, you don't even have to, sell it to somebody else, then you just get a drink afterwards and you rewarded yourself for all that hard work. Josh knows how much I've talked about ice. There's sometimes when we're still working on a recipe and he makes it and we're doing a stirred cocktail and I watch how he builds the certain levels of where the ice is placed. I call it a sandwich. When you do stirred cocktails, there's a big piece of ice that starts chilling your cocktail. Then there's all your little ingredients. So there are little chips of ice that basically are your dilution. And then the second piece, the last layer, your top piece of bread is cooling it down again. So you're controlling how much you're diluting when you stir. And when he doesn't build the sandwich properly, I talk about it again. And I was where's your lettuce? You didn't chop it enough. So it's definitely something where all of those things incorporate and are important. And that's kind of where I go in. It's all about, for me, it's the end product. Simple ingredients. I don't know if you looked at Widow's Peak's menu. I love focusing on the idea of the simplicity and what that can bring, especially for local distilleries to show off their spirits. I don't want to do something that's overly complicated, which I have. Oh, there's this big ziti Negroni I did for a James Beard dinner. Oh, so fun, but so complicated. But like that didn't really show off the gin in the Negroni in that example. But like for those local distilleries, I want people to fall in love with that beautiful floral Widow's Peak botanical gin, and they can't do that if I like cover it up. So definitely something when I focus on certain clients, that's the intention. So, simplicity, and some of that simplicity, why those cocktails turn out so well is because you focus on like having the local honey, or making sure that you are using the right style of ice when you're shaking, and how long you shake for, and what temperatures you're looking for. So that's,
I think this is so valuable, and why, all the interviews we've done and had the pleasure of doing, this is the first time we've talked about ice. And I think it's so valuable because what you're talking about and what you're speaking to really puts a spotlight on those spirits if you're a craft distillery, on those ingredients if you're a craft cocktail bar. And hopefully it gives people pause to stop and analyze and think about, all right, what's our program? And we have ice. It comes in, that ice machine, it dispenses. We hear it every 10, 15 minutes. It dumps down. We scoop it out and we throw it in the bin right by the speed well, right? The speed rack. Yeah. But then you stop to think, like, your pet peeve is shaking Manhattans, I guess. My pet peeve is being served in old fashioned with crushed ice. Ooh. And to me, when we talk about, or you spoke about, the what the ice does for that cocktail, I don't want a diluted old fashioned. I wanted that chilled and it respected that spirit, that whiskey, or if you do a rum old fashioned or a tequila old fashioned, I want that to be respected. And what you're really touching on is respect for the ingredients by picking and choosing and creating the right ice to chill and dilute, which is what you said.
Yeah.
That is so huge.
Yeah. You don't think about it. And I'm surprised Kenya didn't bring it up, because he also nerded out on it with me back in our Philadelphia distilling days, because he worked at Randstad as well, which is actually, I guess, how I got the Philadelphia distilling job. He showed up at Randstad, and I was working on, a s'mores cocktail. Oh God. And I created like this, what was I doing with, it was s'mores, because I did like a meringue float where I like lit it on fire so that it would become toasted. Oh, what a time.
Now, so why don't we have this now? Why are we sharing this? This sounds delicious.
Oh man, I'll have to find one of my old notebooks. That was like a big thing. There's like a collection that I have of just all those moleskins, like all the miniature ones, just randomly written down with any of the notes that I've ever come up with. And that was something that part of some of the cocktail bars I've worked at is like, the bartender's choice. And a lot of my focuses were on modern or old school classics. A lot of the time, I never really did something where somebody's just like, I just want you to make me something, anything from the shelf. And like, I could do that, but like, I want to guarantee your experience, but I also want to show you that like, technically you can probably get that anywhere else besides just me. So there's a booklet that we used at Randstad called the Madrusin, and I basically consider that like my miniature cocktail Bible. And it would go through and it would list the styles of cocktails and spirits. And whenever somebody was like, I want something citrusy, but I also want it to be rye and, all these other things. And then I would make them something called a Monte Cassino. That was like my favorite thing to do. And a Monte Cassino was lemon juice, rye, yellow chartreuse, and Benedictine, all equal parts, shaken, and served up, with like a little, and no garnish. There are some cocktails that don't need a garnish. What is it? Not every girl needs an accessory. That's what I used to say to some people when I would like bring up a cocktail with no garnish on it. Like sometimes they're just perfect as they are, and they don't need anything else. So, go ahead.
No, I love watching your face light up as you mechanically put the cocktail together. You express and list the ingredients, and you share your vision in words for what the cocktail should be. And we've had Tiffany Berrier on, and we talk cocktails, we talk cocktail history, and a lot of different things. And I'm very excited when I get to talk cocktails, because it's an area that we've, for Dawn and I and Fermented Adventure, we've gotten better at. But having this conversation, now you just mentioned I get to go back and listen to all those ingredients and say, I think the only thing we're missing on the bar is maybe Benedictine, but we can pick that up. And now we can make that cocktail on a Friday night and go back and say, I'm so glad that listeners of the podcast now can hear some of these cocktails or some of your ideas, and either go to find them for some of the consulting work you're doing.
Yeah.
Definitely patronize those bars and restaurants or whoever has your signature, and your stamp on that. All this and your enthusiasm and the way your face lights up. How did you get into cocktails? Because, there's no third grader says, when I grow up, I want to be a cocktail consultant.
Me. No, I'm just kidding. What did I want to do in third grade? I was obsessed with sharks as a kid. I wanted to be a marine biologist that specialized in sharks. The librarian gave me every single shark book that there was in our school library, and I read them all and was obsessed. I still try to dive when I can. I don't have a scuba diving license. I do, what is it called? Snuba diving, which is, I don't know if you've ever heard of that before. Basically,
no, but this is the second shark diving conversation I'm having in 2 days. So something's either telling me I need to start shark diving, or just the world is full of these adventurous people that are diving with sharks.
I mean, but scuba diving is basically it's a hybrid between snorkeling and scuba diving, but basically a lot of, at least what I've been told by my instructors, so don't quote me. Some of the licensing is about the tank that you carry when you scuba dive. So they actually just put the tanks up on the top of the water on a raft, and then you go down with air tubes are going down. So then you're connected, but you're not actually in charge of the air tank. So you can still go pretty deep and just swim and just be there.
Yeah, that sounds like a lot easier than, I mean, I've scuba dive or scuba dove. So that does sound a lot easier. And then you're not, fiddling with the cumbersome tank and the weights and all those things. And so you can really focus on, sharks swimming by.
Yeah, just focus on what's going on in the water. And I don't get to go as often as I'd like. So, getting a scuba diving license didn't seem to economically sound until maybe later on, a dream. But I guess back to the topic of cocktails. When did cocktail consulting, or when did you, really understand that this is certainly it's a thing, but it's a really, it's a thing for you? It really kind of came about. We'll go even as far back before third grade. Baking with my mom as a kid my mom went to culinary school, and she was a chef before she slipped a disc and then had to reevaluate careers and became an accountant.
Shout out to where mom went and attended for culinary school.
Johnson and Wales.
Oh, the same place I went. Yeah, talented people come from there.
Yeah. Love my mom. Hi, Mom.
So you were baking with your mom, and this kind of gave you that bug of ingredients and building stuff? Yeah.
And my mom's very detail oriented. So when we were cooking, it was 3-year-old me rolling that apple core, making sure that every single peel was off that core, every single peel was off that apple before it went into the apple pie. And baking's very exact ingredients and lots of care. So I think I really developed that sense of when I talk about ice and ingredients and appreciation for everything that goes into one thing, I think baking is very focused in that sort of thing. There's a lot of intention when you bake. If you don't do something right, your souffle will not puff up properly. So, I think I always had some sort of passion with focus of food. And then obviously that leads to beverage. My first official foray into cocktails was, I guess it was always just the idea of mixing things together. incorporating all the things. And you do that for cocktails in a restaurant besides actually being a chef and cooking. And I don't know, cooking never really settled for me, like officially. Maybe I could have done it, but you know, my mom talked about it a lot and it just never really felt like a fit kitchen wise. But I still wanted to mix things and, you know, provide something that like I made that somebody would really like. So I actually, funnily enough, went to bartending school, the mainline center for bartending, have my certificate on my fridge. I still put it on my resume. A lot of people who, a lot of my industry friends kind of still are like, why do you put that on your resume? And I'm like, well, I studied for it, I passed it, and now I know how to make a kamikaze. So leave me out of this. What is that? I learned a lot of acronyms through that. Very tragic landing for kamikaze, and it's the triple sec, lime, and vodka. So after that, I was like, I'm ready. I'm so confident. I went to bartending school. I'm going to bartend now. I was hosting and serving at Smoking Betty's in Philadelphia at that time. A bartender no called, no showed for brunch. And you know, fresh off graduation, I went behind the bar and said,
fresh off graduation, you got your acronyms, you're ready to go.
I was ready to go. So brunch bartender no called, no showed. I went behind the bar, looked at my manager and said, this is my bar now. And then just started bartending and called it a day. Just started, you know, mixing up all the ingredients. Brunch was my main focus then because we sold the most cocktails during brunch. So then I got really into it. And then from there, went to Randstad, and then, you know, then I blossomed. So there you go.
All right, let's talk cocktails. You're a cocktail consultant, and like, what's in your mind, or what do you see? We talked about some of the mistakes with ice or dilution. What do you see right now as far as some of the popular trends in cocktails? Where are cocktails going? If you were to predict the hot cocktail for 2023, some of your ideas in your head.
It's hard to say like what the hot cocktail will be because I don't think anyone was necessarily expecting the espresso martini to all of a sudden become a thing, which I think is a plus and a minus. I think that a lot of places did an espresso martini because they thought it was popular, not because they knew they could actually do it. So it makes it very difficult when, you know, you're trying to, you know, people go and expect something and then they go to a restaurant, they order the espresso martini and it's terrible. And then all of a sudden the whole bar program is frowned upon. And it's, you know, some of those cocktail decisions aren't necessarily just the bartender made it. You know, it could be that, you know, everyone is ordering an espresso martini. So the owner or the manager is like, we need to get an espresso martini on the menu now. I don't care that we don't have an espresso machine. I don't care if we don't have this or whatever. Just, you know, let's get, you know, some coffee and some vodka and some sugar and, you know, shake it up and call it a day. So I don't know. I mean, my hopeful trend is that people do, cocktails with intention. You know, places highlight the things that they could do the best. And that's like, you know, you don't have to go to every single bar and get an espresso martini. You know, this is the place that does the best daiquiri because they, you know, make their own like sugar cane, like extract for the sugar. And, you know, this place does the, you know, the best old fashioned. I really love the Demerara syrup that this one bartender like created and like they really curated into their old fashioned. But hot cocktail, I mean, I want it to be a daiquiri. I love a daiquiri. That is my go-to. You know how everyone kind of like goes to a bar and they like have the one thing that they want to get. People get gin and tonics, you know, vodka sodas, whatever that is. I go into a cocktail bar and the first thing I get is a daiquiri. If you can't make a daiquiri, then that's, I guess, as aggressive as it might sound, I don't want to get any other cocktails from you because if you can't do lime, sugar, and rum shaken up, like what else could you provide me? I don't want to spend the money. That I could do it better at home. But I haven't it's been a long time since I've had a disappointing daiquiri. I guess one time I had, oh God, I won't say the name of the bar. I feel like that's fair.
Thank you.
Yeah, no. Sorry to whichever bartender who didn't know what a daiquiri was and just said yes and then made it. But we ordered daiquiris, me and a friend of mine, and it got served tall, with like a whole bunch of soda and rum, and then like I can't guarantee that the lime juice was fresh.
It sounds like it was a cross between a mojito and who else knows what was going on in the head of the bartender.
Confused, which is fine. It also relates to the fact that, they, clearly just said yes, didn't know what it was, and just put something together and called it a day. And hey, I like to do random things in a glass every once in a while. But there's always this thing of like, people just get frustrated when someone doesn't know a random cocktail that they brought up. I've kind of been one of those people where if I don't know it, I'm going to tell you. Like, I've never heard of it before, but like, if you tell me what's in it, I'm happy to make it for you. So I feel like that scenario could have been like, oh, a daiquiri. Well, I don't know what's in that, like, can you tell me what's in it?
And could you help me out? Or,
like whatever. Like, I mean, the idea is at the end of the at the end of the day, like, we both want to be happy. You just want to make me what I want so that I pay and I tip you, and then, all that other stuff. And then, I just want to drink a daiquiri. So there we are. So yeah, I guess, I just want simplicity. I would love to just go back to basics. Some cocktails that just are like, I mean, don't get me wrong. I love a 10 ingredient tiki cocktail. Like, make tiki complicated, but I'd love people to just kind of like take a step back and just kind of like go back to basics and just.
Quick question: do you have a favorite tiki bar?
Ooh, so I don't know if you know, but Franklin Mortgage started doing their tiki nights again on Tuesdays.
Yes. That's what I heard. I saw that on the website too. So sometimes things make it there, but then they don't make it to reality. So
yeah. So they used to have an upstairs tiki, which I did actually used to go to when they had it open. There was, there was always a talented crew over there. And there's a talented crew over at the new location now. And they do Tiki Tuesdays. My friend Patrick O'Brien is super talented. And, I also have like friends like Sean Clark over at Black Squirrel. He makes, he is a tiki man. I buy him Hawaiian shirts for his birthday, and there's never not a time that he won't drop a drink in front of me that's lit on fire, which is probably my favorite thing about him. He also called me VIP, so I also like that. But yeah, so like, I think almost any cocktail bar for the most part can kind of do most tiki cocktails. I don't want to promise that. I'm sorry, cocktail bartenders, that I might have just gotten in trouble. But I think there's a lot of, classic cocktail routes that are in tiki. There are reasons why certain ingredients are added together. It's not just like a whole bunch of sweet stuff and rum and calling it a day. There's balance. There's beautiful balance things. I mean, you even think about like a Mai Tai. And when you get like a fresh orgeat that you make in-house, and the type of rum that you use, and, all that kind of stuff all leads to like, a really beautiful experience than just, I mean, I had plenty of Mai Tais when I went to Hawaii. But there is still something, just, when all ingredients are beautiful and fresh and they own individual touches, always an experience. So,
Michelle, as a cocktail consultant, what 3 ingredients are you saying, look, whether it's your home bar or the bar program we're going to set up here, you must have these, or these are things that are really important, maybe to set you a little apart. Which way would you go?
I mean, when you're talking ingredients, are you talking spirits? Are you talking bitters? Are you talking tools?
I'm going to leave it up to you. You're consulting with my bar program, and I'm saying we're starting from scratch. What should we have? What? Oh
man, best of luck to you in this economy. I'm just kidding. I mean, once again, let's just keep going on that ice train. Ice, obviously, please spend some money. If you're not going to do your own hand crushed ice, spend some money on a cold draft or a Hoshizaki machine. Make it worth your while. Invest it. I think bar tools are extremely important. A jigger, as simple as it is. And Because I think free pouring, although I have done it, still freaks me out. I don't like it. Even though I learned it in bartending school. I think every cocktail deserves balance and proper ingredients, and a jigger does that for you. I'd prefer a Japanese jigger myself. And then, like a spirit you enjoy. I think that's another thing. If you don't like the things that are behind your bar, how are you expected to relate anything back to your guest? So for me, I can pretty much get excited about most things. Maybe my only flaw is that I really just don't like bourbon straight, but I figured out how to love bourbon in other ways. But I love a gin. That's, or an Isla Scotch. But I think for me, that's, my back bar is, I have like a bookcase that, I thought I was only going to need one to fill all of my liquor. And now I'm like, 6 bags deep on the floor in my bar room of all the other bottles that I've collected over time. But yeah, no, I think like my top 3 things would be ice, a jigger, and a spirit that you can, in a desert island choice sort of spirit, no matter what, that's something that you're always going to want to drink. That would be my 3 recommendations.
What would be your desert island spirit that, besides the album collection, the 3 albums you want to bring with you? I'm dating myself to say albums, but what would be your spirit you couldn't go without?
Ooh, it's tough because, I used to play this game with some of my close friends. We have like a little friend group that we call ourselves the Fleabags, but spelled PH. We played bar on a belt. So if you had to be a traveling bartender with bottles on your belt, what bottles would you pick based on what you would serve?
So what's on your belt? I wouldn't want to call that Batman belt, but oh
God, let's not get into that whole thing. There's Patrick brings up all the time that that like belt thing that like goes across your chest. He like is like, oh, so we're gonna have that too. And I'm like, no, that's like so many extra tools. That's not fair. That's cheating. Just one belt on your pants. You can get a little pouch if you need to, but like it's all got to stay on your belt, and it takes up territory.
Am I allowed to bring up a fanny pack? Can I bring that one in too?
Well, so the small pouch is like the cheat. That's your okay. Fanny pack. And in my little pouch, I put like was it like a tiny knife? So and like one piece of fruit. And I think like some clothespins, baby clothespins. I'm like obsessed with those.
Oh, I love those things.
Although there was an article that said that they're no longer trendy. And I was like, well, I go against trends. So here's my baby clothespins.
Yeah.
So my bar and my belt. Well, that's the thing. It gets into the whole thing of like I would build cocktails, and that's how it would end up on my belt. How many daiquiris do I want to make? So many. So I'm gonna have like a 750 of rum. That's gonna take up a decent amount of my belt. But like I'm obsessed with gin variations. So obviously another 750 is gonna be another bottle of gin on the other hip. And then you start getting into like, I want to do like Negroni variations. I love a cheeky Negroni, which is gonna be like, Aperol and gin and depending on your preference, I like Blanc vermouth, but some people do like Lillet Blanc in their cheeky. So it's just like this kind of like light little floral, fun, like spring touch. For me, a cheeky Negroni is always like a spring Negroni. But I would have like a bottle of Blanc vermouth, but probably I think, is it available in a 375? See, that was another thing that we did is we made it all PLCB compliant. So like if it wasn't available in the store as a 375, we couldn't put it on our belt. It had to be what size? Oh yeah.
So many rules.
So many rules. I don't know if you've noticed yet. I have a lot of rules.
You're very detailed and structured, which I think as a cocktail consultant, helping your customers put this together, I think that's really important. Yeah. As a cocktail consultant, as with Cudia Cocktail Consulting for you, what can people expect when they work with you? Philosophy-wise, I think we're talking ice and we're talking structure, but what else, what are some of the philosophies you're bringing to help either set up a bar, change a bar program, or, really get things ramped up?
I guess what I bring to the table, I suppose, is an excitement about cocktails. So it's like just somebody that's intentionally excited about a certain part of your program. Like I'm excited about coming in and showing you all of this stuff and bringing that knowledge to you so that that excitement carries to your guests. So Josh is a great example of, this kind of thing where I came in Widow's Peak before Josh did. Josh gets hired. Josh comes in. Wonderful human being. I don't think I've met anybody so friendly as Josh Douglas. And he was so excited. Like, I came in, I started talking all this stuff and getting all like in my little, my little mode. And then, he comes back like the next day after we started training and he's like, I made all these cocktails for my friends. Oh my God. And I made sure to do the shake. And, I like bought a jigger and I bought this little bartending kit so I could do it at home. And here's all the things I did. And then I went to this bar and I tried this thing and they didn't shake their cocktail right. So like, I knew it wasn't good. And that kind of energy is like what I want out of like what I bring to the table. Like when even as small as when I do somebody's wedding or someone's bachelor party, I want them to feel the same excitement I do, like sharing the cocktail love. Because I think it is, cocktails are meant to be celebratory. Even down to like the idea of a, oh God, what is it called? A black velvet, the Guinness and champagne, where although it was about a funeral, it was still like kind of like celebrating that person, that ruler. And, cocktails are always have some sort of thing to it where like there's like joy and I want to bring that joy to people. And, they make me happy, mocktail to regular cocktail. And I want people to feel that way. And that's kind of like what I hope to bring to people's bars. And some of that is that serious attention to detail because it's care. I want people to be excited because then they'll care. And then when they care, things come out the way that they're supposed to and, right and beautiful. So yeah, that's what I do.
You just touched on something briefly by talking about that black velvet where you related to the history of it, right?
Yeah.
And I think also if you understand, and these cocktails do have history.
Oh yeah.
Somebody playing behind the bar and then creates this, and then this becomes their cocktail, the signature cocktail of that bar, that cocktail bar. There's so much fun when you learn more about just besides the fact that it has some sort of alcohol, some sort of citrus, some sort of sweetening agent, some sort of a bitter, when you put it all together, you say, oh my God, I didn't know that. Pardon the interruption. If you like what you hear, if you love what you're hearing, please share the podcast. Please take a screenshot of the podcast, post it on your social media, tag us just to let everybody else know about Fermented Adventure, the podcast. We'd be grateful for your help to grow our podcast. You mentioned like you do bachelor parties and weddings. Talk about that side of what you do with your cocktail consulting program.
I mean, it's, and I talked about this, in our pre-interview, for the most part, like, I think a fun part of, this business for me is, somebody reaches out and they say like, oh, I want to do this thing. And, I'm wondering if that you can help. And, it could be something that maybe I don't necessarily have experience in doing in the first place, but I'm like, all right, so this is what involves this is what involves that. Let's do it. I, fell into, my original intention with it was definitely bar and restaurant focused. I love developing programs. I love being a part of that. I love training people, and bringing all of that excitement to an industry-based people because, they're my people. They understand me, sometimes, I'm sure that, ice is not everyone's love, just mine. But I do have my friends out there for that. And, but then, you talk to the people on the opposite side of the bar and there are some regulars that you're kind of like, you're just as much of my friend as the bartender that's next to me. Because they're excited too. There were people that used to visit me at Philadelphia Distilling And, eventually I leave, as, people do. You leave restaurants, you go on to the next opportunity and you learn more, which is always my thing when I go into new interviews. I'm like, I'm ready to learn the next thing. So, I see them a couple years later and they're just like, I still loved what you did. And I tell my friends about like, the history of the bee's knees that, I don't know. Do you know the history about the bee's knees? Well, okay.
Sure. So, because, here's the thing, our listeners can learn too.
Yeah. Well, I think that every history thing is sometimes lore, sometimes true. There's like, I think 2 different stories about the history of a Moscow mule. But anyway, my story for the bee's knees, or at least what I tell people, is that it was created by Molly Brown, also known as Unsinkable Molly Brown, who actually survived the Titanic sinking. She went to France during Prohibition in the United States, and a lot of American socialites were like partying in Paris at that time. So she would make this drink for her friends during Prohibition, for like their little American parties in Paris. And it was, lemon, honey, and gin. And there you go. We called it the bee's knees, and it is the bee's knees. It's a beautiful expression, especially with, Widow's Peak botanical gin, but also blue coat elderflower, the expression that we talked about pre-interview as well. That honey is like such a beautiful note with the elderflower, really brings out the floral notes and the natural like musky elderflowerness. But anyway, but like, there's people that still talk about some of that history stuff that I like brought up to them when they were like hanging out at the bar. Or like whenever I would learn something new, I would like, and I would make that cocktail for somebody because I wanted to tell them about it. And then, people still come back years later talking about how like, the things that, they remember when I served them. And that kind of excitement is something that I like bringing to now people's special occasions. I think weddings and birthdays and all of those special memories, can easily be ruined by a terrible drink. Well, we had this party and this specialty cocktail, but like the specialty cocktail was garbage, but we had a great time otherwise. So, part of that too is customizing a cocktail for people for those special days, exactly what they want. So I've kind of gotten into the Mr. and Mrs. sort of thing with weddings. I'm actually going to be doing my cousin's wedding. They're Mr. and Mrs., my younger cousin. Can't believe she's getting married. But anyway, it's one of those things where I just like, I get them on the phone and they're just kind of like, oh, how does this work? We've never thought about doing this. And I was like, well, it's pretty easy. You just tell me what you like drinking. When you go out to bars, what do you drink? And we're just going to chat it through. And then I'm going to come to your house and I'm going to make you like 5 or 6 different cocktails and you're going to pick one. And then we're going to have a great time. So, it gets down to like questions as, what you wouldn't really expect somebody to ask you about a cocktail is like, what's your favorite style of cuisine? Like, what do you like eating when you go out to a restaurant? What's your favorite food? And like getting into that kind of stuff, or like when you're on vacation, like what cocktail do you like go and drink? Or, what's your, if we really get into it, depending on how long the conversation is like a food memory. Or like where you guys went on your first date. If it's, a wedding sort of thing. There was one couple who met at like this coffee shop and they couldn't stop talking about the coffee shop, and they talked about like what they each ordered and went through this whole thing. And then I ended up creating for the bride this like dirty chai inspired like white Russian. Well, technically a Dominicana, aged rum, white Russian is called a Dominicana. And I created like this coconut chai, like cream top for it. So it had like, like a little bit of like, I made like a chai concentrate to like kind of make like a chai, like coffee liqueur. And then, used like this beautiful Dominican aged rum and, stirred that up and then did the float and then did a little cinnamon on top. And then like talked to them about how like, it really inspired me when she talked about like the, the chai that she had, and she like remembers what it tasted like when she was on the date. Talking to this boy that she wasn't sure if she was going to go on a second date with. And lo and behold, they're getting married. And they just like, I mean, I'm even tearing up a little bit thinking about it. but it's like some of those things where I love being a part of that. And that's also like the thing with Cocktails with Intention is like that touch and that memory. So, doing the weddings and the birthdays is being a part of that event. I want that to also be a memory for you of like what you had, and it like further like enhances your event. So yeah.
see, this is why I now understand why Josh was really singing your praises. And it wasn't any, it was unique. It was authentic. And, the story and him sharing how he was making cocktails, that came from your inspiration. That came from your experience, your knowledge that you're imparting on people. Yeah. And the more you do what you do, whether it's coming to somebody's home or going to a wedding or an event at another location, going to a bar or a restaurant to help with a cocktail program, you're making the cocktail world better. That's a value to me as a consumer, because the more I get quality cocktails, and it could just be a daiquiri. I could have the best daiquiri in the world, and it's simple. It doesn't have to be, like you said, those 10 ingredient tiki drinks, although I love those too.
Oh, yeah.
When you come across somebody like you, Michelle, that really takes an ownership and a pride in not only the work that they do, but a representative of an industry, that's what's soundly resonating. That's what's soundly resonating with me. This is when you go and you reach out to Michelle Cudia and you want all this consulting for your cocktails. You're getting passion, desire, energy, history, attention to detail. For those that want all that, how do they find you? How do they connect with you?
So I would probably say the easiest way is through my website. Simple enough, CudiaCocktails.com. So that's CUDIA cocktails.com. I do also have an Instagram. So that's Cudia_cocktails. You can also see me at my day job if you want. I'm a general manager over at Kafar Cafe. I kind of still like my restaurant passion and my guests. So, I still got to keep that going. So if you ever want a Jerusalem bagel, recommended egg and cheese, and to say hi and maybe talk about some cocktail stuff, I'm always around. But for consulting, I would definitely say CudiaCocktails.com. I have a section there for contact. Feel free to write me an email about what you're thinking about doing, and let's see if we can work together. And, I'm always excited to try new things related to cocktails.
Is there anything we haven't talked today on the podcast that you want to share about you or your cocktail business, or something you just want to get off your mind about cocktails in general?
Oh, man. Stop putting ice in coops. That might be my only... Oh God, was that a trend a couple years ago? Did you see some of those? I don't know if anyone's ever seen like the beautiful Instagram pictures where you're looking and you're like, oh man, this cocktail's so beautiful. And all of a sudden it's a coupe with like a diamond shaped piece of ice in the coupe. I'm like, that's not the point of the coupe. There's also a whole glassware nerdiness too, where, the idea of the stem is that the cocktail's not supposed to have ice because you're holding on to the stem instead of holding on to the, like the bell part or whatever of the glass itself, because you're not heating up the cocktail. You're maintaining its temperature by holding the stem. So why do you need ice? No. And then it's going to hit your nose, and then your nose is cold. I hate a cold nose. But yeah, I don't know. Just sometimes it's as, simple as, don't fix what's not broken. A coupe doesn't need ice. It's built to not have ice. So stop doing that, I guess.
That's a perfect way to end. Stop doing ice. It doesn't need that.
Don't need it.
Michelle, this has been a treat. This has been, look, as our conversations go, I think the only thing missing today were some ingredients and making some cocktails together. So we might have to add that to our bucket list of sitting down and making cocktails with Michelle. Thank you so much. Thanks for being a friend of Fermented Adventure. And we can't wait to go and see you at the wedding for that Mr. and Mrs. cocktail. That'll be fun. And just are excited to try and enjoy all the things that you're providing in the world. So thank you so much.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for having me. This was a very fun conversation. I always love talking to a fellow booze nerd when I can.
No one's called me a booze nerd, but thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Thanks, Michelle.
Yeah, for sure.